The resort lobby's air conditioning blew an artificial chill that contrasted sharply with the sticky heat we'd left outside, along with the luggage and the silent tension that always accompanied our family trips. We were all there. My father, sporting a forced vacation smile. My mother, adjusting the collar of his shirt as if it were her own accessory. My sister Trice, already checking her phone, probably sharing our arrival with the world. Her husband, Mark, looking around with a vaguely bored air, and little Chloe, my restless niece, already tugging at her mother's hand to go see the pool, and me, Eleanor, the quiet daughter, the piece that completed the picture, but rarely starred in it. The receptionist, a young woman with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, slid 5 dark leather key holders across the polished marble counter. 5 for 6 people. I watched my father's hands gather the keys, their weight almost symbolic. He distributed them. 1 for him and Mom, 1 for Trice and Mark, 1 for Chloe, who would actually stay with her parents, but the gesture was important. And the remaining 2, well, they stayed there, in his hand, as his eyes met mine. Eleanor, honey, he began, using that patronizing tone he always employed when dictating a solution convenient for everyone but me. The resort is a bit full this week. It seems we could only get these rooms. You don't mind staying on the sofa bed in our suite's living room, do you? You're always so understanding. Understanding. That was the word they used to describe my ability to shrink myself, to not take up space, to accept the crumbs without complaint. I nodded, an almost imperceptible movement. My reflection in the huge gilded mirror behind the counter showed a 30-year-old woman, her face serene, perhaps a little pale under the cold light. No one there could have guessed the silent storm brewing inside me. There wasn't a key for me, just fabric, folded and forgotten. The phrase echoed in my mind, as familiar as it was painful. The sofa bed, the makeshift spot, the leftover space, the usual fate of the quiet daughter. But this time, something was different. While my father pocketed the remaining keys and my mother was already arguing with Trice about which room had the better view, I felt another weight, a different kind of weight, in the discreet pocket of my jacket. It wasn't leather. It wasn't heavy. It was a thin magnetic card engraved with a number, 1701. The Penthouse suite, reserved and paid for by me, weeks earlier, in absolute secrecy. Nobody needed to know. Not yet. My acceptance of the sofa was just another layer of silence, the final piece of the disguise I had worn my entire life. I glanced at the nearby elevator, bank. The doors of one slid shut with a soft whoosh, carrying other guests to their designated rooms. My elevator would be different. It would go higher. I forced a small smile, the kind of smile they expected. Of course, Dad, no problem. I turned slowly, moving away from the group already heading towards their assigned elevators. I just forgot something in the car. I'll meet you guys up there. No one seemed to notice my departure. They were too busy with their keys, their views, their planned vacation. I walked back towards the entrance, the sound of my discreet heels, on the marble marking the beginning of something new. The car was just an excuse. My destination was elsewhere. And for the first time, it would be a destination chosen solely by me. The cold marble floor of the resort lobby seemed to seep into my bones, pulling me back years back to another floor, this one covered in a worn floral carpet. It was always the same month, October, my birthday month, Trice's birthday month. But somehow only one celebration ever materialized. One cake, usually chocolate because Trice preferred it. One set of balloons, one chorus of happy birthday. My name, Eleanor, never graced the icing. It wasn't an oversight. It was an efficiency measure, my mother explained once, her voice brisk. It's just easier this way, dear. Less fuss. Less fuss for them, perhaps. For me, it was a yearly lesson in erasure. I learned to stand slightly behind Trice as she blew out the candles, learned to clap along with everyone else, learned to manage the hollow ache in my chest as she unwrapped gifts addressed solely to her. I remember one year, maybe I was 7 or 8, the theme was princesses. Trice, naturally, was the birthday princess, complete with a tiara that sparkled under the dining room chandelier. I was the helper, handing out napkins, collecting discarded wrapping paper, making sure the younger cousins didn't spill juice on the good rug. My role was functional, necessary, but invisible, like the air. That year, a girl from my class, Sarah, came to the party. She didn't know the family dynamics, the unspoken rules. She handed me a small, clumsily wrapped box. Inside was a friendship bracelet, woven with bright pink and purple threads, and a tiny plastic charm shaped like the letter E. "Happy birthday, Eleanor," she whispered, her eyes wide and earnest. It was the only gift I received that day with my name attached, the only acknowledgement that October held significance for me too. I clutched that bracelet like a lifeline. Later, when my mother saw it, she simply remarked, "Oh, how quaint. Make sure you thank Sarah properly." There was no recognition of the disparity, no flicker of understanding. Why would there be? They expected me to be content with the reflected glow of Trice's spotlight. I wasn't forgotten. I was expected to disappear quietly. The thought wasn't bitter then, just a dawning realization, heavy and cold. I learned to navigate the edges of family photos, to offer the last piece of cake, to fade into the background when important guests arrived. My compliance was mistaken for contentment, my silence for agreement. I became an expert at tidying up the aftermath of other people's joy, at praising my sister's achievements, while my own small victories went unnoticed. Asking for anything felt like a transgression, a disruption of the carefully constructed family narrative where Trice, Sean and I simply existed. The floral carpet witnessed countless moments like these, absorbing the quiet weight of my invisibility. The pattern solidified during my teenage years, hardening from quiet acceptance into a dull, persistent ache of disillusionment. Gifts continued to be unilateral declarations of their expectations, not acknowledgments of my existence. For my 16th birthday, a milestone they couldn't entirely merge with Trice's 18th that same year, I received a set of expensive luggage. "For when you travel, dear," my mother said brightly, placing it beside Trice's brand new convertible keys, the red bow on the car gleaming under the garage lights. The implication was clear. Trice was being launched into her future while I was being equipped to leave, or perhaps just to carry the baggage, literal and metaphorical. Photographs from that era tell a similar story. Endless albums filled with Trice's prom night, Trice's graduation, Trice's first car. I'm occasionally visible in the background, a blurred figure handing someone a drink, my hand steady despite the tremor inside, or half hidden behind my father's shoulder, my smile feeling like a borrowed coat. There's one particularly telling photo from Trice's high school graduation party. The whole family is gathered around her, beaming, the flash reflecting off their proud eyes. I'm standing just outside the frame, holding a tray of rapidly emptying spring rolls, my expression unreadable, the cheap fabric of my borrowed dress scratching slightly against my skin. It wasn't that I wasn't invited into the frame. It was that no one seemed to notice I wasn't there. My own graduations, middle school, high school, were non-events. A card with cash tucked inside, the crisp bills feeling impersonal. A brief, "Well done, Eleanor," before the conversation inevitably shifted back to Trice's latest drama or achievement. There were no parties, no proud parental photos plastering the fridge. It was as if my milestones were mere footnotes in the grand narrative of the family. I remember my high school graduation vividly, not for the ceremony itself, but for the aftermath. While Trice's graduation a couple of years prior had warranted a lavish catered affair at home, mine was marked by a quiet dinner at a chain restaurant, the scent of stale frying oil clinging to the air. My father spent most of the meal on his phone, the blue light illuminating his face as he closed a deal. My mother fretted about Trice's upcoming college applications, twisting her napkin into knots. When I tentatively mentioned the academic award I'd received, first honors in English, my father glanced up briefly, his eyes already distant. "That's nice, Ellie. Keep up the good work." Then, back to his phone. The award, a small, framed certificate with my name printed in elegant calligraphy on thick, cream-colored paper, ended up in a box in my closet, tucked beneath old sweaters. I kept the certificate, taped shut inside its cardboard mailer, hidden in my drawer like a receipt no one ever asked to see, proof of effort, filed away unseen. They loved the version of me that didn't need anything. That thought crystallized during those years. My quietness, my lack of demands, wasn't seen as a virtue, but as a convenience. It allowed them to focus their resources, their attention, their pride on Trice, the daughter who demanded it, who reflected their ambitions back at them. The silent turning point came during my senior year. I'd saved up money from a part-time library job, a job they barely acknowledged, the scent of old paper and binding glue clinging to my clothes when I came home. I used the money, the cash saved from birthdays and my library work, not for clothes or makeup, but to buy a used camera, heavy and solid in my hands. Photography became my escape, a way to frame the world through my own lens, to capture the details others missed. I started documenting things, not just the staged family moments, but the quiet, overlooked corners of our lives. The way the light hit the dust motes dancing in my room, the chipped paint on the back porch railing, the strained expression on my mother's face when she thought no one was looking. It was my first act of quiet rebellion, creating a narrative that was solely mine, unseen and unapproved. It wasn't about exposing them, not yet. It was about proving to myself that my perspective mattered, even if only to me. The luggage sat in my closet, gathering dust. I wasn't going anywhere just yet, but I was starting to pack differently. Adulthood didn't magically grant me visibility, but it did offer distance. I moved out, got a steady, unremarkable office job, and built a life that was mine, albeit modest. Visits back home for holidays or obligatory family events became exercises in navigating the familiar landscape of subtle disregard. The micro-injustices continued, quieter now, perhaps, but no less sharp. Decisions were made without consulting me, selling the old swing set I loved without a word, planning family vacations where my preferences were never solicited, assuming my availability for tasks Trice was too busy for. It was during these visits that the seeds of resistance, planted years ago with that old camera, began to sprout, albeit silently. I stopped automatically volunteering to clear the table, leaving the plates where they lay. I started declining last-minute requests to babysit Chloe if I had other plans, offering polite but firm refusals without elaborate excuses. "Sorry, I have a prior commitment." No further details offered. I learned to hold my ground in small ways, creating boundaries where none had existed. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet withdrawal of the expected compliance. They barely seemed to notice, attributing my shifts to Eleanor being Eleanor. Quiet, perhaps a little odd, but ultimately harmless. They didn't see boundaries. They saw inconvenience. My refusals were met with mild surprise, sometimes a flicker of annoyance, but never genuine inquiry. Why would they inquire? The system worked perfectly well for them when I simply complied. The catalyst for the resort trip, for the Penthouse, arrived not with a bang, but with a carelessly forwarded audio message. It landed in the family group chat late one Tuesday night, sent by Trice. clearly intended for her husband Mark, but accidentally broadcast to all of us. In it, she was laughing, describing the upcoming family vacation plans to him. And Dad, booked the suites, the usual setup, her voice chirped, laced with amusement that grated against the silence of my apartment. Mom already suggested Ellie can just crash on the sofa bed in their room again. Saves a fortune, and honestly, where else would she go? It's not like she ever brings anyone or needs the space. She'll be fine. She always is. There was a pause. Then Mark's muffled reply, something indistinct, followed by more laughter from Trice. Exactly. She probably prefers it, less pressure, Poor Ellie. Poor Ellie. The words hung in the digital air, stark and condescending. My phone felt heavy in my hand, cold against my palm. It wasn't just the assumption, the casual dismissal of my comfort and autonomy. It was the pity, the easy acceptance of my second-class status within the family, framed as concern. I listened twice, not for the words, for the tone, the casual certainty, the complete lack of doubt. I didn't react in the group chat. No angry emojis, no pointed questions, no demands for correction. I simply let the message sit there, unacknowledged by me, though I saw the notification that Mom and Dad had liked it with a thumbs-up icon. I'd been missing from their attention for years. Now I'd simply catch up with my own absence. Instead, I got up from the sofa, walked to the kitchen, filled the kettle, stood watching the small blue light glow as the water heated. The low hum filled the quiet apartment. I made tea, held the warm mug in my hands, letting the steam curl around my face, staring out the window at the city lights blurring in the distance. I didn't taste the tea, just felt its warmth. A small, contained heat in the midst of a growing coldness inside. Then, I put the mug down, walked back to the living room, picked up my laptop from the coffee table. The screen illuminated my face in the dim light. The resort website glowed, familiar from previous hypothetical searches. This time, it wasn't hypothetical. Navigating. The booking system felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. Suite. Penthouse. The price was exorbitant, far more than I should reasonably spend. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the statement. A silent, definitive statement. I typed in my credit card details, my fingers steady, precise. Confirmation email arrived moments later. Booking. Confirmed. Penthouse Suite, Eleanor Vance. I closed the laptop gently. The decision was made. The die was cast. They could have their assumptions, their pity, their convenient narratives. I had my reservation. I bypassed the main elevator bank where my family had ascended, their chatter fading behind me, and walked towards a smaller, more discreet lift tucked away near the concierge desk. Polished brass, hushed carpet. It required a keycard for access. Mine. I slid the thin plastic card, 1701, into the slot. A soft, low chime indicated acceptance, and the doors slid open silently, revealing an interior paneled in dark, gleaming mahogany and soft, indirect lighting. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and something else, exclusivity. Alone in the ascending cabin, the smooth hum a stark contrast to the usual family cacophony, I watched the floor numbers climb. 10, 12, 15. Each illuminated digit felt like shedding a layer of the old Eleanor, the one who accepted the sofa bed without question, the one whose presence was conditional. This was movement on my own terms, unseen, unheard. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse foyer. As I stepped out, a uniformed staff member, perhaps a floor manager, passed by, pausing almost imperceptibly. He glanced at the open elevator, then at me, offering a brief professional nod. "Ms. Vance, welcome. Everything is prepared for you." Please let us know if you require anything at all." He didn't linger, didn't pry, just a simple acknowledgement. Ms. Vance. Not Ellie. Not the quiet daughter. Ms. Vance, the guest in 1701. The space unfolded before me, vast and silent, bathed in the warm golden glow of the late afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. A panoramic view of the ocean stretched out, glittering and immense under a sky beginning to blush with sunset hues. It wasn't just a room, it was an expanse. Mine. I walk through the suite, my footsteps echoing, slightly on the polished hardwood floors, the sound absorbed by thick plush rugs. There was a spacious living area with deep, cream-colored sofas. Real sofas, not pull-outs, their fabric cool beneath my fingertips. A dining area with a heavy glass table, a kitchenette stocked with complimentary sparkling water and gourmet, snacks in minimalist packaging, and a bedroom larger than my entire apartment back home. The air was still and cool. The bathroom featured a soaking tub overlooking the sea, impossibly blue. On a small dark wood table near the window, a complimentary bottle of chilled white wine sat nestled in a hammered silver bucket, condensation beating on the glass. Beside it, a single elegant crystal flute stood waiting. Not 5 glasses, not 6. 1. Waiting for me. I picked up the bottle, its weight cool and solid, reassuring in my hand. Using the provided corkscrew, a heavy, satisfying mechanism, I opened it with practiced ease. The pop of the cork a small, contained sound in the large room. A skill honed during years of serving others at family gatherings, now employed, solely for myself. I poured a generous measure, the pale gold liquid catching the light. Taking a sip, the crisp wine sharp and cold on my tongue, I walked out onto the private balcony. The breeze, stronger up here, ruffled my hair, carrying the scent of salt and distant rain. Down below, far down, the main pool area was a mosaic of bright towels and tiny moving figures. My family was likely down there, or settling into their standard rooms, perhaps unpacking, perhaps already arguing mildly about dinner plans, perhaps wondering briefly where Eleanor had disappeared to after fetching something from the car. My mind drifted to the suite they occupied, the one where the sofa bed awaited me like a patient, unwelcome relative. I pictured it clearly. The slightly faded floral pattern on the cushions, the inevitable dip in the middle from previous occupants, the thin synthetic blanket folded neatly at its foot, an image of temporary accommodation, of making do, an untouched symbol of their expectation and my quiet, definitive refusal. Here, the sheets were crisp, the space intentional. This wasn't leftover room, it was chosen territory. I leaned against the cool metal railing, swirling the wine in my glass, watching the light refract through the crystal. This wasn't just a room with a view, it was a viewpoint, a place from which to observe, to breathe, to simply be, without apology or explanation. I didn't need their key, I had my own, and it had opened a door they didn't even know existed. Later that evening, the low murmur of conversation and the clink of silverware filled the resort's main restaurant. I chose to arrive slightly late, pausing just inside the entrance, allowing my eyes to adjust to the soft lighting. I scanned the room, the scent of grilled fish and warm bread mingling in the air. I saw them at a large round table near the panoramic window overlooking the now dark ocean. My father holding court, gesturing with his fork. My mother fussing over Chloe, straightening her napkin. Trice and Mark heads bent together, laughing, quietly at something on her phone. There was an empty chair, pulled up expectantly, squeezed between my mother and Mark. A space waiting to be filled by the person they assumed would arrive. My gaze drifted past their table, towards the wing where my parents' suite was located. Through the partially open curtains of their living area, illuminated by a single lamp, I could just make out the distinct shape of the sofa bed. It remained undisturbed, the cushions plump, the floral pattern stark and slightly faded under the Artificial light. Empty. Unneeded. A silent refusal made visible. I didn't walk towards their table. Instead, I approached the maitre d', a man with silvering hair and a starched collar, who stood near a podium. I gave my name quietly, Eleanor Vance, and requested, "A table for one, please. Perhaps somewhere quiet?" He consulted his chart, then nodded slightly, leading me without comment to a smaller table, elegantly set with a single white rose in a slender vase, tucked into a slightly recessed alcove. It offered a discreet view of both the moonlit ocean outside and, diagonally, my family's table. Perfect. I ordered my meal. Grilled sea bass, a glass of the same white wine I'd had earlier, enjoying the simple luxury of choosing exactly what I wanted without consultation or compromise. As I unfolded my own napkin, the crisp linen cool against my fingers, I watched them. They hadn't noticed my separate seating arrangement yet. The conversation flowed, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of cutlery against china. It was a familiar scene, a tableau I had observed from the periphery countless times, usually while refilling water glasses or fetching forgotten items. The first flicker of awareness came, predictably, from Chloe. Her high-pitched voice, unfiltered, cut through the low hum of the restaurant. "Mommy, where's Aunt Ellie? Isn't she coming? Her chair is empty." Trice glanced around, her eyes scanning the nearby tables before landing, inevitably, on me. A brief, unguarded expression of surprise, perhaps confusion, flickered across her face before being quickly masked by practiced nonchalance. She leaned over and whispered something to my mother, who then also turned, her brow furrowing slightly as she located me in my quiet corner. My father, interrupted mid-anecdote, followed their gaze. He saw me, registered my separate table, the single-place setting, the glass of wine, the menu open before me. He didn't wave or call out. A subtle tightening around his mouth, a momentary pause in his story, was the only visible reaction before he turned back to his audience. It was Sarah, the sister-in-law, ever the astute observer navigating the edges of the core family dynamics, who provided the verbal acknowledgement, though framed as a justification, smoothing over the potential awkwardness. "Oh, Eleanor probably just wanted some quiet time," she offered to the table, her voice carrying slightly in a momentary lull. "You know how independent she is." Independent. The word hung there, a convenient label, a dismissal wrapped in faint praise. It wasn't independence they saw. It was my perceived lack of need, my willingness to be self-sufficient, so they wouldn't have to be inconvenienced by my existence. My absence became a presence. The empty chair at their table, spotlighted by Chloe's innocent question, was suddenly more conspicuous than my quiet presence at my own. The rhythm of their conversation faltered, just for a beat. Trice looked down at her plate, tracing the rim with her finger. My mother took a sudden intense interest in refolding her already perfectly folded napkin. My father cleared his throat, a little too loudly, and resumed his story. But the easy flow, the effortless command of the table, was momentarily disrupted. I didn't offer an explanation, didn't wave reassuringly, or mouth an apology. I simply met my mother's brief, questioning gaze across the room with a calm, neutral expression, held it for a second, then deliberately turned my attention back to the dark ocean view outside my window, taking a slow sip of my wine. The silence from my corner table seemed to amplify, creating a subtle, vibrating tension that hadn't existed before. The empty sofa bed in their suite, the empty chair at their table, my deliberate, chosen separateness. It was all part of the same quiet, unfolding statement. They were beginning to notice the space I occupied, precisely because I was choosing, finally, not to occupy the space they had always assigned me. The rest of the vacation unfolded with a subtle, persistent awkwardness, like a poorly tuned instrument. In the background hum of resort life, there were no confrontations, no dramatic scenes, just a slight shift in the atmosphere, a new, almost hesitant awareness in their glances towards me. They offered polite, slightly strained invitations to join their activities. "Ellie, we're going snorkeling. Care to join?" Which I sometimes accepted, sometimes declined with a calm, "No, thank you. I have other plans." Always maintaining my own space, my own rhythm. The penthouse remained my sanctuary, its quiet expanse a silent testament to my altered position, the scent of lemon polish a clean contrast to the cloying sweetness of forced family harmony. I decided to leave a day early. I didn't announce it with fanfare or seek permission. While they were out on a catamaran trip, another brightly planned activity I hadn't been consulted on, I packed my single suitcase methodically. Folded clothes, the few toiletries I'd brought, simple, efficient. I checked out quietly at the front desk, the same receptionist from arrival offering a polite, impersonal smile. I settled my bill, the penthouse, the solo dinners, the single, glasses of wine, with my own card. The transaction felt clean, final. Driving away from the resort, the imposing gates shrinking in the rearview mirror under the harsh midday sun, felt less like an escape, and more like a simple departure. The drive home was peaceful, miles of highway unspooled before me. The silence in the car was mine, chosen and comfortable, filled only by the low hum of the engine and the occasional swish of passing cars, unlike the heavy, loaded silences of my childhood, back in my own apartment. The familiar space felt different, calmer, more solid, the air still carrying the faint scent of the tea I'd made before leaving. It was mine, earned and maintained through my own efforts, not granted as a leftover. That evening, sorting through the small pile of mail that had accumulated on the mat, bills, junk mail, a postcard from a friend, I found it. Tucked between a supermarket flyer and a bank statement was the official invitation to Trice's upcoming engagement party. Thick, cream-colored cardstock, elegant, swirling script. "Mr. and Mrs. Robert Vance request the pleasure of your company." It felt like an artifact from another life, heavy in my hand. A life where my attendance was assumed, my role predefined. I didn't throw it away. I didn't tear it up. Instead, I walked over to the small, non-functional fireplace in my living room. A purely decorative feature I'd always liked for its quiet solidity. I propped the invitation up on the dusty mantelpiece, standing alone against the cool, dark brick. A symbol of their world, placed deliberately within mine, but not controlling it. Observed, not obeyed. It could stay there, a reminder of the dynamics I was no longer passively accepting, a silent counterpoint to the emptiness of the space around it. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, the insistent, familiar notification sound of the family group chat, likely buzzing with questions about my early departure, logistics for their return, or plans for their last night. I picked up the phone, the screen glowing with unread messages, looked at the preview briefly, Trice asking where I went, Mom asking if I got home okay. Then, deliberately, I pressed the button to silence the notifications for that specific chat. Not blocking them, not deleting the conversation, just silencing the noise, turning down the volume on their expectations, creating quiet on my own terms. Never asked for a room, but never again slept on the couch. The thought settled deep within me, not with the heat of triumph, but with a quiet, cool sense of equilibrium. The journey wasn't over. The ingrained family dynamics wouldn't magically transform overnight. There would be other invitations, other expectations, other potential sofas. But something fundamental, irreversible, had shifted within me. I had chosen my own room, paid my own way, served myself wine, and left when I was ready. The silence was no longer just an imposition endured. It was a space I could choose, could shape, could inhabit. And in that choice, finally, I found my footing.